All right. So welcome, John Bertino. We have a longtime pal and colleague and business partner. John owns a company called Tag, the agency guide. John is probably one of the more knowledgeable people I know in the world of marketing. And quite frankly, John and I have, I don't know, we've had thousands upon thousands of conversations with business owners over the years about how to choose the right marketing channels for their business. So I thought it would be good to have John join this call since one of the themes we touch upon here as a community constantly is, how do I generate more leads? How do I sell more? How do I better position my brand? All that kind of stuff. We're always talking about these things. So it just made a lot of sense to bring John on and tell us a little bit about who he is, and then we'll go from there. So, John, welcome to Entrepreneurment. It's great to have you here. Maybe you can tell the community a brief about yourself and the work you do at Tag. We'll go from there.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Tim. Hey guys. Good morning. Nice to connect with you all. And thanks for giving me a little bit of your time today. So background on TAG, right, Tim?
Mhm.
So TAG, which is an acronym for the Agency Guide, is a unique business I started just over 10 years ago. And we are essentially a marketing consultancy, but again, a very unique one. We consult with brands of varying sizes. I mean, truly, we've worked with some very large companies. I've worked with some very small companies just getting started and everything in between. But when we consult with these brands, we do so typically pro bono, so for free. And through that process, we look to align with that brand on what marketing channels they should be investing in and why, what reasonable or fair investments in those marketing channels would or should look like and why. And once we align on what they should do, why they should do it, and roughly what it's going to cost, it's at that point that we look to introduce or essentially match make them with one of the 300 or so teams we represent. So we represent about 300 different marketing agencies, consultants, and in some cases, service providers. And again, matchmaking the right brands to the right agency or service provider based on their specific needs. There's no cost for any of this, as I alluded to. And that's because we make our revenue through the agencies we represent. But that's only when they actually hire, when the brand actually hires that agency, and much more so if they stay with them, which is a really cool model because it means that we're authentically incentivized to give great advice and then put that brand with an agency they're really going to be happy with, because it's only if that engagement lasts that we actually make revenue that makes it all worthwhile. So we're really in this business of creating these win-win-win scenarios. As cliche as it sounds, it's super true, and that's what we've been doing for over 10 years. Through the consults, the various consults we do, man, just about every industry comes across my desk, which is not only challenging but also makes it fun, to be honest. And we're also consulting on really almost all aspects of marketing, because we'll get all kinds of requests from PR to influencer marketing to SEO to branding. And there's also a small tag team. There's really 5 different individuals that help consult with the brands and introduce the agencies. And so that means, depending on what the ask is from the brand, we might put different tag team members on that project to help guide the process. Because, as much as I have consulted on all aspects of marketing at this point in my career, I'm not this most seasoned brand strategist on the team. So like something like that might flow through our guy Steven, or I'm not the most seasoned organic social media expert on the team. So something like that might flow through someone else. So yeah, that's our model at Tag, and it was really satisfying, gratifying work.
Awesome. Thanks for the background. So you have had thousands of these conversations. When someone comes to you and they say, yeah, I got this project, whatever it is, and I'd like to hire an agency. What's the first thing that goes through your mind when you hear someone saying, yeah, I'm interested in hiring an agency to help me sell more of what I do?
Right. Well, what goes through my mind immediately well, how are we defining agency? That's an interesting question for everyone by today's standards. And is an agency actually what they want or need or the best fit here? So agency is one of these words at this point in time that means different things to different people, and it's actually kind of vague because some people are one person defining themselves as an agency, and then of course you've got agencies that are thousands of people, if not tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds. So first we want to define what that is, but taking that a step further, even if they do think they want a more classic, sizable agency, is that really what's recommended? I mentioned we represent, excuse me, about 300 different marketing teams or service providers. The vast majority are more boutique in nature. So by boutique, we'll define that as, 5 people to like 35 people. And that's for good reason, because with a boutique agency, and you're getting an inside secret here, guys, with a boutique agency, you tend to get the best value at the best price, not always, but oftentimes the best value at the best price. And you're also tend to be the least steps removed from ownership and or the least steps removed from the most strategic thinkers within the organization. So we're not against big agencies, and we represent quite a few of them. And sometimes they are the right resource for the job. But generally speaking, unless you're a larger client, you do end up generally getting relegated to a more junior-ish project or account manager. And you're usually a couple steps removed from the seasoned strategist and or the ownership. And that's not always ideal. So yeah, really understand, kind of defining what type of agency is really going to be the right fit, and aligning with that brand or that prospect on what's going to be not only the right fit, but the right structure that's going to make them happy and feel like their needs are being met. That's something that we're going to look at there, Tim.
Okay. And when it comes to determining the right marketing channels for your business, sometimes I hear, let's say, a coach or an agency or a brand owner, they feel like they need different things. For example, an e-commerce brand may feel, I just need paid media, Facebook. A service provider may say, I just need Google. It's all I need. Some people are super hot on content and they're like, I'm all in on content, organic. You don't hear as much about SEO as you once did, but I think that term SEO has changed a little bit. How does someone go about determining what's the right channel for them, or is it you need all of it?
Sure. So do we have 3 hours or 30
Yeah,
minutes?
exactly.
By the way, I
Yeah,
just noticed a few
27
names
minutes.
I recognize. Shout out Danny G, shout out Billy Coker, shout out David Martinez, shout out Dan or Ted Horton, all good guys I've met over the years. So different channel selection. So, oh boy, that's just a hard one to answer quickly, but I'm going to do my best. So, it's funny, a lot of small businesses, the last thing they want to do is state what their budget is, because they're worried that they're just going to get proposals that come in for their budget. But actually with marketing, that's usually a smart way to do it. So I'll preempt my answer by saying that generally speaking, when you're going to hire a marketer, you're better served by giving 3 different resources the same budget and see what they come back with, so you can compare who's giving you the best value for the dollar, versus saying, oh, we're not sure what our budget is, you tell me what you can do, because then you're going to get all different stuff that's all over the map. And I can assure you it's harder to choose who's the right vendor for you when you do it that way. So I would actually define a budget. And then taking that a step further, really the reason I say that in the first place is that with marketing, it's one of these things where you can always do more. You really can. I mean, there's so much you can do between even just the various social media channels alone, let alone SEO, let alone tweaking your brand, let alone. There's so many things you can do. And so, you talk about, well, what are the right marketing channels for me? A lot of times that depends on how big your budget is. So let's say, for example, you just had, I'm going to assume we're talking mostly to relatively small business and startups here, right, Tim?
Right.
Well, typically with small businesses and startups, there's a very finite or fixed amount of marketing dollars or resources that can be applied. And if those resources don't turn an ROI, that brand is in a bad place. So oftentimes, though not always, but oftentimes if that sounds like you and you're that situation, ads is probably one of the places you should look first or focus on. That's not a general prescription for everybody in every situation because it is situational. But generally speaking, ads is the first place you should look. Why? Well, the power of digital ads is that you can get your message in front of a lot of people very quickly that are very targeted, faster than any other channel, right? SEO, and that's my background, is not really going to do that for you. It's not going to get you in front of the perfect eyeballs very fast in a measurable, quantifiable way within a few months. Tweaking your brand, as much as I'm a huge advocate for developing a really incredible brand with great creative, that's not going to put your company and your message in front of a bunch of targeted people very quickly. And PR, same thing. And organic social, same thing. Only ads get you in front of a lot of people very quickly that are hyper targeted. But that's not necessarily a cure-all, don't get me wrong. The flip side of that is with ads, you're not really establishing any trust because you're just an advertiser, and you're renting the visibility and you're renting the space. You turn off that spigot on ads and all that visibility is gone. And those are not small problems. Those are major sticking points or challenges or shortcomings, really is the right word for digital ads. And so that starts to build the case for some of these other things I mentioned, such as refining your brand, working on your SEO, looking at earned media like PR. They kind of have the opposite pros and cons, guys, in that especially earned media like PR. And I actually like to think of SEO as earned media because through good content marketing, you earn your way up the ladder in search engines. These types of things have staying power, so the visibility isn't rented like it is with ads. And they build trust, which is huge, 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 huge. I can't say it enough. So you kind of need to do a little bit of a cost benefit analysis of what's more important to build a presence, to build trust, to build visibility over time that has staying power. It's a lot like renting a house versus buying one, right? It's actually quite similar to that. When you buy the house, there's obvious benefits. That's yours for a nice extended period of time, but it might take you a long time to get there. Whereas when you rent, you can get it much quicker, much easier. You're in and you're out, and you get that house, that place to live very quickly. That's kind of the difference between ads and something that's more of an earned medium. I could riff on this forever. One other thing I'll say though, one other thing I'll say, since I'm trying to give a truncated version, is that regardless of if you're doing something more on the paid end of the marketing spectrum versus the earned or organic side of the marketing spectrum, is your ability to convert that traffic into customers has a lot to do with your brand. So now we're starting to build the case for things like owned media and brand. You really need to get that messaging right, that identity right, that brand voice right, to help put yourself in the best position to convert customers. So what did I just give you there? I gave you a bunch of word soup that makes it really hard to make the decision. And that's because there kind of is no right answer. You need to pick your poison.
Well, I would say that you did give us an answer. Yeah. Because because we are in many cases when you're just getting it going or you're early stage. And when we say small budget, by the way, that could be $500 a month. In some arenas, small budgets could be $1 million a year. Some people are like, hey, we have a budget, we only have $1 million a year.
Subjective.
But so you did say that paid media was the fastest, most direct path to get the clicks and to get the eyeballs. Your point about that being rented is phenomenal, and that creating your own original content is better for staying power.
Yep.
Which is a great point. And that would come through creating, original content that gets the organic views. And then
trade-offs, right? That's the thing. Yeah. There is no silver bullet. Pick your poison. That's the main thing I want to leave you with. Go ahead.
Well, and let me ask you about trust. So you mentioned trust a couple times. How do you define trust? What is trust? How do we build it with our brands?
Oh boy. Well, how we build it is the easier part to articulate. What is trust? A little bit harder, but
in the context of driving traffic and getting people to see you as a trusted source that, yes, I will give you my email. Yes, I will click your ad. Yes, I will buy from you. And that kind of.
Sure. So people like to do business with entities or individuals they know, like, and trust. It's an old axiom, but it maintains just as much true today as it did whenever it first was said. And so the goal becomes, how do I get potential customers to know me, to like me, and to trust me? And those are actually three different things. So the know part has to do with casting a wider net, just being able to get in front of people. And that's where we start to, again, look at ads being the most powerful way to get in front of people very quickly. It's harder to get people to know you with something like content or like an organic social, which again is a content play. It's really just content distribution, takes more time. Liking is separate as well. Liking, I mean, how to define when somebody likes you, what it takes to get people to like you, that's a bit more of an art than a science. But suffice to say, that has one of the ways that you can help increase your chances of being liked is to work through that brand messaging quite a bit, very clear on who you are and what you stand for, at least from a business perspective, and stay true to those core values. That becomes a bit of a brand messaging component. And then trust, again, one of these things that's very hard to define, but one way that we can build trust is repeated interactions and providing repeated bits of value, right? So ultimately, the name of the game there is content. And these days, whereas when we would constantly talk content marketing, 8, 10, 12 years ago, you were usually talking written content, and that's still true for sure. But it's much easier now to crank out video content like we are all doing right now. So webinar content, content really is the key to earning trust over time. And I'll add to that in order to deliver content to people repeatedly over time, you need to have a way in which you can touch them multiple times. And that's not necessarily easy to accomplish, or you need to have a mechanism by which to do that. So your choices are basically retargeting ads, but again, you're still an advertiser, SMS, but that's only a medium that works for very specific businesses, email, or having them opt into your social. And it's those last two, email and social, that so many people lean on, and as they should. So again, in closing on that point, it's create content that people like to get on their radar, then they opt in to some type of mechanism through which you can remarket or retarget them. Usually it's email or organic social, and through providing value over time, that's how you build trust. But it's a much slower play than ads.
Yeah. It kind of harkens this image of people that call it in. And we see this where someone says, I don't want to be involved in any of my marketing. And that's fine. That's okay. Right? It's fine. And I don't want anything to do with it. I mean, Nike would say, we have this massive budget. We're going to hand it over to 10 different agencies in all these different countries. And of course, we can't be involved in every nook and cranny. But when you're small and you're just getting going, you should be very involved in your content. And you really probably shouldn't just call it in and hire an agency and wonder why the leads aren't. I mean, what's your take on calling it in when you're picking an agency, you're picking your channels? Because I see people go to ChatGPT and they create a bunch of content and they just put it out there, and then they're wondering why they're not getting the leads. And sometimes I feel like they're just calling it in. You're not being a real person out there in the internet. What's your take on that?
A really poignant observation there, Mr. Martinez. Well, the first thing that jumps out, and I think you kind of said this without directly saying it, is that some things are easier to outsource than others. And the closer it is to your brand message, the harder it is to outsource. And I think to some extent we intuitively know this, right? Like, it's a lot easier to hire an agency or a third-party consultant or what have you to run your ads than it is to have them run your organic social. And the other challenge there is it's a lot harder to trace a clear and distinct and quantifiable ROI back to that organic social, which makes, organic social is one of the hardest things to outsource, which I think ultimately is what you're touching on. So again, I think the closer it is to like your brand message and your brand identity and conveying over time what your message and identity is, it's a lot harder to just send it to a third party and go, here, you do this. And that might sound obvious, but people try all the time. Or they wonder why, the organic social media agency they hired is letting them down and it's not really working. It's because there's only so much a third party can do without quite a bit of involvement and direction from you. And again, I think that kind of starts with having a clear brand messaging and identity standards. And for those of you that don't know, a brand book, also known as brand guidelines, it is the thing. It's a common thing that a branding team or strategy consultant will produce for you that provide these very specific rules, and that's what they are. They're rules around when we talk about brand X. This is what we do say. This is what we don't say. This is what we stand for. Maybe this is what we don't stand for. Here's who our audience personas are. This is the way we communicate with each one of them separately. And identity too, which is really fancy marketer speak for your look, your feel, your aesthetic, your color scheme, your fonts, typography, things like this. There's rules you have to put around that too. Rules that help make sure that every touch point someone has with your brand, they're getting a consistent experience. It's funny when you zoom out and you just hear a marketer like me say these things: brand book, touch points, messaging. It sounds like a bunch of jargon, but it's really, really important stuff, right? So again, whenever you're going to outsource whenever you're going to outsource the touch points with your brand's organic interactions with potential prospects, it's critical that they have rules to follow. Otherwise you're going to get stuff that feels off brand. And the rules to follow usually is a brand book, and everyone should go through that exercise. Can I answer the question, Tim?
Yeah, that answers the question. It answers the question because I think what you're saying is you should be the closest to your brand than anybody else, at least in the beginning, so you can own who you are, own how you talk about yourself, and really not call that part in. You might be able to call in someone setting up your Facebook account or your Google account, but when it comes to how you speak about you should be authentic and true for as long as possible and set up your guidelines for that.
Or yeah, at least have a lot of rules around it. Otherwise, you're going to get very lukewarm, vanilla stuff, and that represents your brand miserably, right? That's the exact opposite of how you want to come off on social, is vanilla, bland, and generic.
Yeah.
But that's the only way for a third party to manage it for you without a lot of rules to follow. They're going to play it safe if they're smart.
Sure.
But play it safe doesn't really work. So there's a paradox there.
Okay, well, I have a last question here for you, and then we will open it up to some Q&A. So get your questions ready for John. We are in the age of AI, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up and say, how should we be thinking about AI in our marketing tech stack as it relates to how much should we lean on it for content? What should we be aware of? What does Google not like right now? Like, let's open up the AI conversation just as our last bit here.
Yeah, sure. And then so much to discuss there, but the most obvious use case and intersection between, let's narrow it down to ChatGPT for the moment. The most obvious use case and intersection between content and a tool like ChatGPT is, written content for a website and/or written content for your social media. Let's start with for the website, which would usually be like an SEO play, right? The general prevailing sentiment or understanding is that if I create a bunch of content and put it on my website, that's going to help me with SEO, right? Well, not exactly, and that's a strong not really. In general, getting more relevant words about what you do into a website is going to give you somewhat of an SEO lift. But the more scattered and less strategic and topically clustered that content is, the more watered down and lukewarm your results are going to be. And now, through the advent of ChatGPT and other, large language model content-based tools, Google has in turn responded, essentially by looking for content that seems AI generated. And also they were already, even before the rollout of tools like this, working very closely on experience, expertise, authority, and trust, commonly referred to as EEAT. So what I'm saying is Google doesn't just give you a bunch of credit, ranking credit for loading up your site with a bunch of words. They want those words to be topically clustered, as I previously mentioned, and I can define that if you guys would like. But also show to demonstrate your true, I'll say it again, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. So the acronym is EEAT. It's really important to look into, but fairly difficult to define. Essentially, it's Google's best effort to understand algorithmically who actually has real life experience, real life expertise, real life authority, and real life trust. And so you'll have to look into that. There's a number of different tactics that help you establish that, but it's much easier said than done. And that's the point, right? If Google can separate the content from who's the person behind it, or rather look at all content by understanding who's the person behind it, they can do a much better job of just deciding who deserves to rank. So the quick takeaway is, don't just think you can create content for content's sake, load up your site, you're going to see a significant ranking benefit. It's much more complex than that. Second thing here would be that if you are going to do that, you should absolutely put a pair of human eyes on that content. You should, i.e., someone should take time to edit that content and put a human touch on it and refine it for accuracy. The ChatGPT and these other AI tools, they do still, quote unquote, hallucinate. They will put in things that are either inaccurate or false, or that it just makes up, and that hasn't gone away yet. So not only do you want to preview for accuracy, but you also want to edit and make sure, again, there's a human touch on it. And then just quickly on the social point, I actually feel like I like these AI tools a little bit more for social, but it starts to get back to that brand conversation, and you still really should have human eyes on it. So I think it's use the AI tool to produce some short form content that you might leverage for social, but make sure you put your personal touch on it that's in line with your brand standards, which we previously discussed.
Very thorough answer, as you do. Thank you for that. And before we open this up to Q&A, how do the good folks here get a hold of you?
Oh, sure. We're all over social, as well as I have a YouTube show and podcast that folks should know about. So most of our social handles are Agency Guide HQ, or The Agency Guide. If you search for us plus Instagram plus Facebook, we'll come up. So again, it's The Agency Guide, theagencyguide.com. You can email me at john@theagencyguide.com. And then our YouTube show, which is really starting to pick up, is called the Niche Marketing Podcast, where we strategically pick a niche and then interview 5 to 10 different marketers that know that specific niche to build a cool cluster of content all about how to market that thing in that way. And then we switch to different niches. So that's the Niche Marketing Podcast. You can find us on YouTube.
Awesome. Thanks again. All right, folks, if you got a question here for John, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and come on in. Yes, Brian.
All right. John, nice. Question around building that guide identity to be able to.
Hey, Brian, you're kind of breaking up a little bit.
Hey, is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Much better, much better.
All right. So around actually building that guide, building that brand identity right to be able to share and get out there with marketers, I can see that being just very valuable overall. Do you guys work with companies to do that, or do you have partners that you work with to help people do that?
The answer is both. Usually when we're getting a marketing request, the objective is to refine that request, refine that scope of work, and then introduce the different teams to do that. It just so happens that since all marketing kind of needs to flow through brand, that we found it to be valuable for us to help brands with that directly. So in other words, if an agency said, or excuse me, if a brand says, hey, I need a great social media or influencer marketing team, and then we look at their brand and it's kind of a mess. Well, following our own advice I just gave you, we want to get that dialed in. And if that's a sticking point before we can get them to an agency, we realized some time ago that we wanted to be able to help brands with that very specific thing you just asked about, Brian, to help them with it directly. So for small businesses, the answer is my colleague Steven can run you through a branding workshop and or a fixed branding exercise to help you get some of that stuff dialed in before we get you to an agency. Or if you're a larger business and you want to do the real kind of enterprise approach to branding, then we have a multitude of agencies we can connect you to for that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
All right, other questions? Raise your hands, come on in, unmute yourself.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. You got the marketing guru here. I'm gonna call on some people too, because I know we got some folks in here that
I'm
need.
gonna volunteer before you
Yeah,
call
come on in,
him.
Billy.
So I was thinking, John, what you were saying. Well, it's good to see you, first of all. I'm gonna stay off camera today, so you can't see me. But I miss you. It's great to see you. So I was watching, you know, as we do, kind of doom scrolling through LinkedIn, and there was a good little bit of information on AI using ChatGPT for personal brand content. I thought was very helpful. So the guy was sharing how he ran a bunch of points through ChatGPT and got a script for a video piece he was going to put together, and he realized it wasn't his voice. And so, but the content there was really good. So it just took the time, just taking the time to take what he saw and translate it into his own way of speaking, made a huge effect. And so, to your point, like, really, those tools are great for it's almost like hiring a junior copywriter to get you started and get the ideas on paper, or almost like a research tool. And then once he was able to put it in his own voice, he felt like he had a really good piece of content that he could put out there. So I would just suggest that as a best practice, use ChatGPT as a springboard and really let yourself take it from there and let it be your voice, and whatever your objective is, make sure it hits all those points.
Yeah, that's a good point, Billy. I would agree. Ideation, right? And something else that occurs to me is, if you have a good keyword research tool, guys, here's a pro tip. Use the keyword research tool to develop either a list of keywords and or related questions, or if better yet, you have a topic modeling tool to export a list of subtopics, and then you can upload those subtopics, keywords, and questions into ChatGPT. You can actually do document upload now, which is so much better, and then have it write a script or content, and that'll tend to be more on point. But that doesn't necessarily mitigate. In fact, it most likely won't mitigate the need for you to jump in there and provide your own personal touch, but it will get you, I think, closer. So use keyword research data and related stuff to upload into ChatGPT to get better responses.
All right, Richard.
Hi, I'm going to keep my camera off. Definitely not looking my best today.
Richard, I loved you on the Seahawks, man.
Oh, thanks.
Great.
Best years of my life up there.
Yeah.
So sort of following up on the last content and ChatGPT conversation, I've spent a short time sort of playing around with making a ChatGPT personal GPT, like brand GPT, for some of my marketing clients as sort of a lower cost, but still somewhat effective way to streamline their content creation and their brand voice a little bit. I've had mixed results, and I'm wondering what sort of strategies you've used other than the two you just mentioned, if you do that sort of a thing at all, to help train up an LLM to really do an excellent job maintaining voice or consistent visual or verbal brand.
Sure. I'll need to preface or caveat my answer by saying that as much as I know about brand strategy and messaging and identity work, it's not my personal area of marketing expertise. And usually we'll pull in my colleague Steven to do the consults, or we'll do the introductions to the agency. So as far as spending time in the trenches working with ChatGPT and brand messaging work for clients, really the only entity I've personally done that for is myself, or for my own companies. There are two tidbits though that come to mind. You may already know about these, but you can develop a profile within ChatGPT where you can essentially give it background on yourself and store it in the settings, unless they phase that out. But as of a couple months ago, you were able to do that, so that the intention was that it would be permanent, essentially permanent information that's stored in ChatGPT. So they already know that about you, and you don't need to tell it the same thing every time. Hi, I'm John Bertino. I matchmake brands with agencies and consult. Like, you can store that. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing would be, and this is a small thing, but it's helped me a lot. When you just get back to the redundancy of asking ChatGPT, or excuse me, instructing ChatGPT the same things over and over again, I use a tool called Briskine that allows you to auto input templated text. So we have a fairly robust process for when we're creating briefs for agencies around conversations we had. And so our process, I use ChatGPT to help me refine those briefs, but that refinement process is very specific. I have very specific requests and instructions, and they need to be phased out over time. So what I do is I store them in Briskine as templated prompts. And I will say, you know, prompt 1, enter, and it'll enter this list of instructions I have. It'll run its process, and then I'll do prompt 2, enter, and it'll give it an extensive list of instructions, so on and so forth, repeat, repeat, repeat. And it ends up being like a 6-step templated process. So, you know, long story short, any way that you can shortcut the amount of time it takes to give ChatGPT instructions is a massive time saver, because that's the massive time suck. And so Briskine and that information you can store in ChatGPT itself has been the 2 ways I've done that. Beyond that, Tim will have to pull on Stephen Bacons to tell you about how he's used ChatGPT for branding projects.
Thanks very much.
Yep. Cool. Deandra.
Good morning.
Hey, hi,
And thank
Deandra.
you so much for your time, John. This is really helpful. I'm part of a husband-wife team. We're filmmakers. He's not here today because he's burning the candle at both ends, working on a film festival. But
Cool.
just really interested in hearing just your take on a lot of the brands that you work with. How do they find their filmmaking teams for video content? You know, how could filmmakers who have some experience doing that kind of content, you know, make themselves attractive, get connected? Do they have in-house teams? Do they outsource content depending on the size of a project? Just would love to get your take on that.
I think I can give you some nuggets there. So the first thing I'll say is, if I'm talking to the brand, the way they're finding those video marketing resources is probably us, because that's probably a good chance that's how we're talking, or why we're talking in the first place. Having said that, I'll try to give you some value above and beyond that. So it is often the case that video is a checkbox on a list of other things that a brand needs. So they'll say something to the effect of, look, we're looking to increase our organic social media presence, or the quality of our content we're putting out there. We're looking for you, John, to connect us to a team that can do that. And oh, by the way, as part of that initiative, you know, we'd like to do more video, right? So it's a component of what they're looking for, and not necessarily all of what they're looking for. But there's an actionable takeaway there for you, Deandra. I can tell you probably one of the best ways, if not the best way, to grow your business would be to build partnerships and relationships with branding agencies. Just so happens, my cousin owns an extremely successful video production agency, and I think almost all his business comes through branding agencies. Once he develops a strong relationship with those teams, they just become a regular conduit for new opportunities. However, here's something else, a different tip or recommendation I would give you. As a guy that's in an interesting role in the epicenter of the marketing services universe, right? I'm not the brands, I'm not the agencies, I'm in between this universe of brands and agencies. What I can tell you, and you've probably experienced this firsthand yourself, is brands want it quicker, faster, cheaper. For right or wrong, for better or worse, the expectation or belief is, I don't need a big video production agency to do this thing for me. And they're often wrong, right? Or or maybe I could more accurately put that, the expectation is I don't need to pay a lot to have this done well. And that's where they're often wrong. Really good, solid, clean video production that's sized multiple different ways, and the lighting's perfect, and the script is really thoughtful, and there sure are a lot of ands on video production. It takes a lot of work and thought, and those things come at a price. But what am I trying to communicate here? That doesn't change the fact that brands think that they can get it quick, fast, cheap, and look awesome. So I would encourage you to, maybe you already do this, I don't know, but have maybe your premium offering, and then have maybe a quick and dirty, accessible offering. And that could potentially serve as a lead magnet for you, which brings us to more general marketing strategy and philosophy, right? If you've got your funnel, and the idea is to get people into the funnel, get them to know, like, and trust you, slowly move a chunk of those individuals to a point of conversion. Well, there's an in-between stage there in the middle of the funnel that's often referred to as a tripwire or a lead magnet. What's the difference between a tripwire and a lead magnet? A lead magnet is usually something you give away for free. A tripwire is usually something you give away at a very low, easily accessible price point or cost. So really, I'm talking about a tripwire. So what I would do is have some type of tripwire offering, this really easy to buy, really digestible price point where brands are like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And then you can deliver them some value. You can show them that you're good at what you do, but almost always they're going to want more than that. That's the point of the tripwire. So just be a taste, a digestible taste. And then that will help you, probably not only will it give you leads and help you sell through your core service, your core offering, but it'll also, again, help you demonstrate value, that you're really good at what you do, which will help you demand a higher price point. Once they say, okay, we can't just hire anybody for this, Deandra's great at this for XYZ reasons, the tripwire gives you an ability to do that. So hopefully that helps.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. Skip.
Hey, John, thanks for the time today. Appreciate you being on the call.
Yep.
Two-part question here. So, you were talking small budget, that's me. Where would you start if you had $500 a month? Would that be like Facebook? Would it be Instagram? A little bit of combination of both? Would it be Amazon? If you've got a store on Amazon already, would you focus there? And then the second part of the question is EEAT. I missed the A. Can you tell me what the A is?
Authority.
Thank you.
Yeah. Experience, expertise, authority, and trust. So that question cannot be answered well without knowing what it is you sell or do. So what do you sell or do?
So we sell a smoked hot pepper, basically an artisan spice that we make in here in Nashville, Tennessee, from smoked peppers.
I dig it. I dig it. I like that. I have like food product CPG envy, to be honest with you. Like, I was just telling my business partner the other day, I want to launch a food product just so I can be doing the stuff you're doing. Like, I want to be in the game. I'm into it.
Well, let's talk.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm just wrapping now, or we're about halfway through an entire series of interviews for my YouTube show, all about how to market a food and beverage CPG. We're 5 episodes in. There's another 5 to come. I'm out here in Chicago right now to interview some people. So you should totally check that out. You'll love it. So the question was $500 a month. I've got a pepper rub, like a rub or a spice you would put on meat, something, or vegetables.
Put it on anything you want to eat.
What would I do? Well, a lot of which you've probably already done, I'm sure, but we almost need to go through those things. One place I would look is Amazon, because, not saying that has to be it, and Amazon will gobble up a ton of your margin. And it sounds like you've already played around there a little bit, if not done a lot there. But the benefit is Amazon, again, we talk about getting a lot of eyeballs quickly, right? If you think about it, that's really what you're giving Amazon all that money for, right? So just to be clear, everybody, when Scott sells his product on Amazon, Amazon's going to take what, like 85% of your margin or something like this, right? Like
it's crazy,
a ton of it, right? So why in the world would anybody do it? Well, exposure, right? Those eyeballs targeted eyeballs and the ability to Amazon to put those targeted individuals in front of Scott's product is extremely valuable. It's then how you slowly look to convert some of those individuals into direct e-commerce. Now, what we've found with food and beverage products in particular is it's not as clean and easy of a switch off of Amazon to direct e-commerce as you might think. For a lot of brands, that's the obvious transition, right? How the hell do I get off of Amazon and do direct sales? But usually we found that one of not only is all the luxuries that Amazon provides, all the fulfillment they can offer, so on and so forth, tends to be at least somewhat justified, but the ability to continue to get that word out is really valuable. But also the ability to break into retailer, brick and mortar retail. If you can show a track record of success through your Amazon sales, that can often be the key to break into brick and mortar retail. So we're actually seeing, believe it or not, a lot of food and beverage brands pulling out of e-commerce and just sticking with Amazon as a point of proof to get into brick and mortar retail. Might not be you, but that's some food for thought. If I wanted to really grow my e-commerce business and get off of Amazon, what would I look at? Well, have you already started to create like some collateral or postcards or other brand touch points, physical brand touch points that when they get the package pushes them to your website? Have you done that yet?
So we do a recipe plus my business card with the website on there. And we started doing a discount code for their next online purchase.
Yeah, there you go. So that would have been the first thing I would look at. You've already done that. So what would be next? Email marketing, probably nurturing, some way to stay in touch with people and continue to remind them that they can purchase directly from you. They don't need to go to Amazon, and offering them some type of incentive to do that. So email would be my first inclination. We probably should have a longer phone call though. Maybe we can do that.
Love to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Yep.
Thanks, Scott. Zal.
Hey, John, just wanted to say thanks so much for stopping in and spending your time here. It's honestly been an awesome learning experience for a young entrepreneur like myself.
Nice.
I am curious on the tech side of things. We were talking a little bit about AI. I've seen a shift in how communities are marketing a little bit, where they're spending a little less money on something like an ad revenue to get eyeballs in and spending the money out of their community, and instead putting that money towards their community members and gifting their community members, let's say, merch or this or that. And instead of having their community members pay for them, using their community members to essentially spread the IP of the brand as a kind of a guerrilla marketing tactic. And I'd love to know if you've seen this shift in dynamics, where you see that kind of going in the future.
What's the industry or vertical or niche you're speaking to?
Music specifically, but music in the Web3 space, they're using blockchain technology and AI to help musicians reach their fans essentially and get more of the margin instead of having to distribute different margins out to different subsidiaries, be the entrepreneur and do the video editing, or have it close to the vested in strategic partners as opposed to paying it out every single time.
Okay, I thought you were angling there. I was going to guess as much. We do have a fair amount of experience in the Web3 space, although this idea of how to work within communities is super specialized. So even though I've had a fair amount of conversations about it, I wouldn't pretend to be the expert in that regard. The question, as I believe I heard it, was, are we seeing brands shift away from ads and more towards a community-based approach that has them offering incentives to community members instead of spending with Mark Zuckerberg? Is that ultimately the question? Got it. Okay. Yes, we've seen that trend. Albeit, blockchain it's really, you can't really get a lot of ad visibility for a lot of products in the Web3 space on traditional advertising platforms. It depends. Perhaps with the music being the focal point, you could, but a lot of Web3 companies are prevented from running ads, so they almost have no other choice in a sense. Perhaps the only thing I could say that would be particularly valuable, other than giving you a wink, wink, and saying we represent some amazing agencies with the community, Web3 community expertise and talent. The other thing I would say is that there is no doubt that community is this idea of how do you leverage an online community to gain visibility, to get people to know, like, and trust you is not front burner. What's the cutting edge, bleeding edge? Like you're right there. Like this is it. This is a hot topic that all marketers are trying to understand better, including myself, and all brands are trying to understand better. Period. And it's a little bit of the wild, wild west right now. I can tell you that one of the reasons community marketing is so powerful, but also difficult, is that you can't just join a community and start promoting what you have. That's the quickest way to get kicked out or get ignored or get made fun of and tarnish your brand. So all roads kind of do point back to providing some level of value. Now the blockchain hook is, how about if that value is money or not fiat, but currency, tokens, right? Maybe the value we can offer is actually a financial incentive through tokens or crypto or whatever. And so that's what's happening. But I think even that isn't necessarily a cure-all, because we've talked to lots of Web3 brands that have plenty of tokens to give away. That doesn't mean the community gives a what about them. So
100%.
it is a delicate balance. And, at risk of being redundant, it is ultimately comes back to trust and content that you use to build that trust. So probably the best answer I can give you right now, but I can get you in touch with people that could go into that super in depth with you.
Oh, I would love to. I love having conversations about that. That's kind of where I love kind of like niching down and understanding that space. So I'd love to kind of continue that conversation. Thanks, John. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, man. And that is no doubt a niche within a niche within a niche. So you've niched down for sure.
Ain't that the truth? All right, we have time for one last quick question. If there's one last quick question floating out there.
Brandon, maybe? He's either sign language or he's talking to us. There you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Tim.
You're really low. Your volume's really low.
Let me see. How's that? Is that better?
A little bit.
Check. Can you guys hear me better now?
A little bit. Sounds like you're underwater, but I've talked to people underwater before, so.
Let me. Sorry,
We've all been there, Brandon. We've all been there.
All right, here we go. Yeah. Oh, you guys hear me better now?
Much better.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, Tim's, you're a legend in these parts in Nashville here. As far as, through Tim and sharing like just what you've been doing, from a referral side. I mean, it's kind of like, what kind of software would you recommend, or what kind of strategy for like similar style of networks, like maybe different verticals than marketers? Maybe it's VCs or kind of like verticals like that Zol's in, like music tech or food. How would you recommend running a similar kind of model for people who are connectors to do some of those matchmaking things and bring in residual income?
That's a Tim question, I think, right, Tim? And even if not, I think it should be. That's probably a better question for you, buddy.
Well, I think the question, if I could paraphrase it, is Brandon is a super connector, to give you some context. And he has a deep network of people that are not in the agency space. I mean, some are, but I think, Brandon, your question is, how is there like a preferred software that we could use to build these affiliate networks, kind of like a tag network?
Yeah, that's good.
I'm building it. Hit me up in like 6 months, Brandon, and we might be able to have a really cool conversation.
Awesome.
What else do you think, Tim?
Well, I would say get your list together. That's probably where I start, is getting your list, getting your email list. I mean, it's so easy to have your email list, to cultivate those relationships. It's kind of like what you're telling Deandra. It's like, and we did a whole session, a whole topic on this when we first started the community, on how to build strategic partnerships. I could repost that video.
We also did this month's challenge. April was the Big Fish Challenge. And those big fish, we talked at length, were not always your customers. They could also be your strategic partners. Because I've seen a lot of businesses wildly successful off the back of maybe 3 or 4 partners. Kind of to your point, John, about your cousin having a few partners. I mean, I could give you example after example of businesses that have been wildly successful because they maybe had 3 or 4 feeders. So Brandon, kind of to that point, it's like you don't need hundreds. Tag represents 300 agencies, but you don't need 300 agencies to get started. When John got started, you probably had 10. And out of those 10, you're going to have your 80-20. You know, maybe 2 or 3 of those are really going to be the ones that are like kind of like driving the traffic in. So I would go lo-fi on this. Honestly, would be my advice, and then wait till John gets his tech up in 6 months, and then go hi-fi.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah. All right.
By the
Yeah.
way, the skip connection and the skip food tag connection is phenomenal. That's key.
Yeah. And you got to get some Skips peppers because they're delicious. All right, everyone. John, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for, sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your insights here. I'll give everyone John's links, and, feel free to contact him as you need. And that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,